Everyone, Kay Berkner here today with Dr. Tom Phelan, author and creator of 123 Magic and the author of The Manager Mom Epidemic. Dr. Phelan, welcome.
Hello, Kay.
I noticed we coordinated our outfits today. That was very clever of us.
I was just noticing the same thing. It's very, very nice coordination.
Absolutely. So today we are going to be talking about what happens when parents expect too much. So Dr. Phelan, you've pointed out that a lot of parent-child conflict at home doesn't actually come from kids misbehaving, which may be a surprise to people. It's coming from parents not knowing what they can realistically expect from their children in terms of behavior at different ages. Can you give us some examples of what that might look like?
Yeah, I'll give you one good example, I think, is kids taking naps. If you have preschoolers, one of your fondest times a day is 2 in the afternoon to 4 in the afternoon when the kids are sacked out and so on. So it's nice to know, well, it's maybe not so nice to know, but when do kids stop taking naps? Well, about 60% of them stop at about age 3. So if you know that, I mean, I've had moms who really want their 9-year-old to be taking a 3-hour nap every afternoon, and that's not a realistic expectation. So when the kids start pushing back against the nap, for example, you can think to yourself, this isn't the end of the world. This is what's coming. I'm going to lose my afternoon recreation time. This is normal. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with my child, but it doesn't mean I have to emotionally adjust to it. So it really helps a lot with adjustment if you know what's coming.
Yeah, preparing for that. I mean, forget my kids. I want to take a 3-hour nap every afternoon. So let's run through a couple of really common questions and examples when it comes to what to expect at different ages. So for instance, at what age, and I hear that I've heard this one a lot in sort of the moms groups I'm in on Facebook, at what age can we expect kids to be potty training?
Well, that's a good point. If you were in other countries, you might expect it to be around age 2. And it's not in the United States. Like 4% of the kids are trained at around age 2. So it's going to be somewhere between 2.5 to age 3. And what you need to do is you need to look for what they call the signs of readiness, that the child shows some interest in the potty. You've modeled it so they can see you. They know how it works, how things go, and so on. And the kids are able to tell you when they feel uncomfortable with it. They're able to do it every now and then. So if you see some of those readiness signs, 2.5 to 3 years of age, girls usually start before boys. That will give you a clue. But that's one of the things, a lot of moms and dads, they just start, the kid's body is twisted in the shape of a pretzel because they have to go so badly. And the parent says, do you have to go potty? And the child says, no. And that's not potty training. So you have to know not only that you look for the readiness signs and then have to know how you're going to handle it. But that's a big one because there's a lot of people that push. And one of the reasons, of course, a lot of parents push is because the preschool is pushing the parents to get their kid potty trained because they don't want to deal with it at school.
Yeah, absolutely. So another one that we hear often is sitting still at the dinner table.
Yeah, that's a good one. Sitting still at the dinner table. We have what we call the 3-minute rule. And the 3-minute rule, so this is how you set your expectations. You take the age of the child and multiply that by 3 minutes. So you have a 2-year-old, multiply that by 3 minutes, you get 6 minutes. And what does that mean? That's how long you can expect that child to sit comfortably at the dinner table after they're no longer hungry. So it's not very long. And I get emails from parents all the time. They want their 4-year-old to sit still after they finish their dessert and carry on a conversation with the rest of the family. Well, we got an 8-minute rule there with the 4-year-old, and it's not going to happen. So that expectation, the 3-minute rule really helps with that.
Terrific. And then how about something like getting ready for bed by themselves? Bedtime routines are a very popular topic here. So at what age would we expect a child to maybe start, getting pajamas on, getting teeth brushed, picking out a story, that type of thing on their own?
Yeah, there are 2 parts to this. One is them remembering that it's time to do that. And when are you going to do that? And the second is them being able to sustain the activity for bedtime. A 6-year-old can normally maintain concentration on a fairly boring activity for about 10 minutes, a 7-year-old, 20 minutes, and so on. So if getting ready for bed takes 10 to 20 minutes, you're talking about your 6 and 7-year-olds might have a shot at it at those ages. But a 3-year-old, you don't say to a 3 or 4-year-old, it's time to get ready for bed, and then walk out of the room and leave them alone. They're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, so they need a little coaching through the process
A
there.
little hand holding, yes.
And certainly, we've talked in past conversations, and I know you've talked in seminars and in the book about how having a bedtime routine definitely makes that go a little bit more smoothly. And you can start setting that up when the kids are younger and still need some coaching through the process. But I have to imagine that that helps then by the time you get to age 6 or 7, if you've been doing the same bedtime routine for the last 2 years, it's probably a little bit easier for them to get through it because so much of it has become habit.
It really does. A 3 and a 4-year-old, you're going to do the routine with them, then say read a story before bedtime. With a 7 or 8-year-old, they're going to do the routine on their own, then read the story with you before bedtime or have talk time or whatever it's going to be. But that's right. You're laying the groundwork with starting the routines early on with the kids.
Yeah. So then one more sort of topic, sometimes when parental expectations and what kids are capable of are out of alignment, one of the responses that you may end up getting from your child is a tantrum. So at what ages are kids most likely to throw tantrums, and at what age should parents expect those tantrums to really start to kind of tail off?
Yeah, you think about 15, 18 months. By the time kids get mobile, just after they get mobile, that's when our tantrum ages start. About 20% of 2 to 3-year-olds are going to have tantrums daily. So think of that, that's at least one a day. That's a lot, during the course of a week. And we like to see them tailing off by around age 4.5 or 5. And so if the kid's still tantruming a lot at those ages, then you want to look into it or get some professional consultation. But those first tantrums are kind of traumatic for us parents, because you see this face and you feel like you've done some god awful thing to your kid. You don't know exactly what it is, and you're getting this horrible response. And it's normal. Your kid's not insane. You're not a bad parent. I always tell parents really appreciate hearing this. A tantrum is usually a sign of good parenting. You set a limit, you said no, you're doing what you're supposed to do, and now you got to deal with the tantrum. But don't feel bad, you did the right thing.
Absolutely. So how does understanding the things that we can expect from kids at different ages help us as parents?
Yeah, basically there's a rule that has to do with anger and expectations. If you and I are getting together in the morning and you say you're going to pick me up at 9 o'clock and you show up at 9:30, well, my expectation was 9. I'm going to be irritated or angry with you. If you show up at 9 and you meet my expectation, then there's no problem at all. So we want to help parents set your expectation. Naps are going to stop 60% of the time, at age 3. That's your expectation. And so you don't get as irritated. So with correct expectation, anger goes way down, and it makes it a lot easier for parents to handle their children.
Terrific. So speaking of things that stress parents out, that's actually a great lead into let us talk briefly about the topic of your 8-minute parenting tip that you're going to be doing next week, which is all about rushing around. I think there are very few parents who feel that we don't have enough stress in our lives. And in next week's 8-minute parenting tip, you're going to be talking about some of the stress that comes from a very specific thing that we're doing in our lives. Can you share what that thing is?
Yeah, well, one one of the things that we're doing is we are overstimulating ourselves and overstimulating our brains. We act almost as if we were supermen and superwomen. We can take all this stimulation and so on. A lot of the overstimulation comes from screens, and we got a lot of screen. The whole, I don't want to exaggerate it, but you look at TVs, phones, iPads, and all that, it's all based on emotional overstimulation. That's what makes money for people. And so we're exposed to that. We're exposed to the news. We're exposed to the television. We're exposed to all these things, and it really gets us rocking and rolling in a way that's unpleasant. So when you add that stress to the stresses of being a parent or so on, and stresses of having a job outside the home and that kind of stuff, we get into a mental tizzy that is sort of chronic and with us all day.
Absolutely. And so where does that stress come from? We're overstimulating ourselves emotionally. So how is that making our lives more stressful?
Well, your question is, where does that stress come from? Based on what I just said, you'd think, well, it comes from the TV, it comes from my phone, etc. No, it doesn't. It comes from what's between your ears. It comes from our brains. And our brains are geared towards solving problems. Our brains are expert problem collectors, problem analyzers, problem solvers, and they're very good at that. The problem is our brain doesn't know when to shut up. If I've got a dentist appointment tomorrow, do I need to make plans for the dentist appointment? I do. I need to make plans. Where am I going? How do I get there? And all this kind of stuff. But then what do? We repeat that whole scenario more than 100 times the day before a dentist appointment. We're going to think about it again, getting anxious about it, getting fearful. How am I going to handle it? You don't need to do that 100 times. But this brain can never be a vacuum. It can never be totally silent. And so it repeats all this garbage. And I'm talking to the tune of thousands of little thoughts per day, take only 3 or 4 seconds, and so on, that get us very emotionally aroused, very anxious, angry, all this kind of stuff all day. Now, what do you think I'm like to live with when I'm going through that process between my ears? I can be very difficult to live with.
Sure. So then if you add in not only the things that are happening in your life that like, oh yes, I do need to think about, making a dentist appointment or making a doctor's appointment or, getting the daycare check-in or whatever, then adding that to the sort of content that you're consuming online that is carefully constructed to stress you out or make you angry or all those clickbait headlines that never end up being quite as drastic as they sound in the headline, but are intended to create an emotional response in you, then it seems like you're intentionally adding things to stress about into your thought process.
We are, and we're sort of doing it without knowing what we're doing. And a lot of our stuff, as you mentioned, we watch the news. What is the news? The news is usually a whole collection of seriously upsetting things that you can't do anything about. Now, I ask you seriously, why would you want to expose yourself to that? A lot of the other concerns that we have to do with money and interpersonal relationships. And those are the things that we repeat thousands of times during the day unnecessarily. So it sounds like we're really crazy. And you know what? We are really crazy. But it's normal. These social addictions that I'm talking about, these brain addictions, are so normal that we're used to them and we don't think anything about it. But it stresses us a lot and it stresses our families a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So next week, Dr. Phelan is going to be doing a brief 8-minute parenting tips seminar on those stressors that are coming out of our brains and sort of what steps parents can take to reclaim some of the fun and the joy of being in the moment there. Then he's also going to be doing a longer seminar on Thursday covering parental expectations, which we talked about earlier in this conversation. And he's going to cover all the topics that we discussed in more depth. And he's also going to address things like kids not listening, sibling rivalry, taking naps, daycare or school drop off, lying, and really helping parents figure out how to set realistic expectations for your own children and your own family and set your kids up to be more successfully independent as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Phelan, for joining us. Make sure you get registered for those seminars next week. We'll post about them on the Facebook page. You can also sign up for the newsletter at 123magic.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.